Hello, and welcome to the God the Artist podcast. I am Morgan McCarver, and I'm so excited that you're here. Today, I wanted to answer some of the questions that I will be asking the guests that I host on this podcast, but I thought it's only appropriate that I introduce myself and answer some of these tough questions first. So, without further ado, here we go. So the first question is, who are you and how do you like to be creative? So like I said, I am Morgan. I mainly am known for being a ceramic artist. I work with clay a lot, so potter is another term that people can use for that. But I'm not just limited to that medium. I also really enjoy painting and sewing. And I also wrote God the Artist, the book, so I would consider myself an author as well. Number 2, how did your love of art start? Well, if you've listened to the podcast that I have guest spoken on, you've probably already heard this story, but my grandmother used to keep me when I was little, and she would make homemade Play-Doh with flour, and it would be so warm after she stirred it up, and we'd put food dye in it to give it different colors. And I guess that's one of my earliest memories of actually being creative is playing with homemade Play-Doh and just everything you could make. You know, there were endless possibilities. You could mix 2 different colors of Play-Doh together and keep doing that until you get brown. But, you know, it's different every time. And it's just so much fun to have that freedom. And I find that same freedom with the clay, that there really aren't that many limitations when you're working with something so moldable as like a Play-Doh or like a clay in the 3D world, which is just really beautiful. Number 3, how does your faith play a part in your artistic practice? Well, and this does lead into my testimony, and I do want to save that for another podcast, but briefly, I would say that my faith plays a huge part in my artistic practice, mainly because I believe that God gave me the creative talents that He did, and He is a creative God, and He gave me the ability to be creative as well. And because of that, I'm able to relate to Him more through my creativity. So I see Him coming alongside me. I ask for His blessing in different projects I begin or try to put out in the world. But I also see His beauty and His creation as inspiration, and that's something that I can draw from and be inspired by. And it's really just a constant conversation between me and God about creating. What am I trying to say? What message am I portraying with this piece of art? And is that ultimately glorifying Him? Number 4, how has God's creativity affected your life? And kind of tying back into number 3, I think it's just everywhere. Nature all around us, for one. Just the colors in the world that exist are stunning. And, you know, some colors you only see in the depths of the ocean, and other colors are only in specific flowers in specific regions on Earth. And I think that's just so amazing that it's these little treasure hunts that God lets us discover. But they've also always been there, you know? So I think that's really beautiful. But even things as bizarre as like animals, you know, like we see squirrels every day, but we don't necessarily, or I don't see like a giraffe every day. And unless I had learned as a child, like giraffes exist, as an adult, you know, if someone was like, yeah, there's an animal with a really long neck, and I had never seen that before, I think I'd have some questions. But it's just amazing to me how many different animals there are with so many different colors and hair or scales, like different textures, different body types, living in different climates, eating different foods. It blows my mind how many different animals exist in the world and different versions of the same species even, which is crazy. Number 5, when would you say that you felt like you made it as an artist? And this is tricky because I feel like imposter syndrome is always a thing, at least for me. But I think there have been several instances where I've really recognized the blessing that God has given me, or the achievement. One would definitely be when God the Artist was picked up to be published. That was huge for me to be able to see that my book was going to be traditionally published, and that it wasn't just a message I was trying to put out into the world, but that a publishing house wanted me to share that same message. So that was huge. Currently, I'm looking forward to Art Fields. That is it's probably one of the largest art competition, fine art exhibitions in the South, at least. And that's coming up this year, so I'm really looking forward to that. I just got into that show for the first time, and I had applied 4 years ago and hadn't gotten in, so it's amazing that it's kind of come full circle, and I did get in this year, and I'm really excited to experience that for the first time. Of course, there's always failures. I probably don't get into twice as many shows as I do get into. I constantly am applying, and it's just whoever says yes, that's the fun part, trying not to focus on the discouragements too much. But those would be the main examples. Probably anytime I've done a solo exhibition is another time where I'm just shocked and amazed that people want to see my work. And it's an amazing experience. It's very humbling. And I get very shy around compliments, but it really is an honor to be able to exhibit my work in an area where other people can see it who might not get to see it in my hometown. So number 6, that was just number 6. Number 7, how are people impacted by your art? And this really is probably more going to be about my new work than my old work. As many of you know, I experienced the devastation of Hurricane Helene that swept across western North Carolina in 2024. And so the work that I was making before that was kind of my signature. It was wildflowers and it was beautiful. And so people reacted to that in a traditional kind of way. It's a porcelain. It reminded them of their grandmother's heirloom china, things like that. But since Helene, I have been doing pieces that are completely different. And I think at first it started out more as just an expression of what I experienced myself, and trying to wrestle with the emotions that I was forced to kind of confront at that time. And so my work switched drastically. I was still working with porcelain, but it was a different type of porcelain that was very translucent. And so I kind of took that ability, that characteristic of the porcelain, and enhanced it by creating this crackle texture and then putting light behind it like a votive. So the crackle was enhanced. And to me, that message is saying that we are all broken in different ways, and the deeper the cracks, the brighter the light shines through. And to me, that is the light of Christ that is within inside of all of us. And so putting that work out into the world, just completely new. That was, for the first time I put that in the world, it was Francis Marion University has a gallery called Gately Gallery, and I had that solo exhibition set up, but for my first body of work. And I had gotten accepted over a year before. I had all of the work made, and then Helene came, and everything that I had made for that show was completely washed somewhere downstream. And so I had to start over with about 9 months to go, which sounds like a lot, but in the ceramics world, you have to let things dry really slowly, and then you have to fire them, which will take a couple of days. Then you have to glaze them and fire them again, which takes another couple of days. And so on top of having a full-time job, it felt like a very short time frame. And so when I put that work out, that was the first place that I really was kind of sharing this message of brokenness and the beauty of Christ kind of filling in the cracks. And I was just shocked, humbled, amazed, blown away. I don't know the right word. speechless, probably, that so many people responded so well in such a positive way and in a way that they could relate, even if they hadn't had experiences from the hurricane like I had. They had gone through other tragedies, and they had recognized that at our most broken is when God is able to shine the most, because that's when we really recognize that we need him the most. So being able to really hear my own message preached back to me through them responding to me, coming up and telling me how they were experiencing my work, it was such a blessing. And I know I was able to bless them in that way, but I think unknowingly they were blessing me by reminding me, keep going. It's okay. You're broken, but God sees you and God is there with you. And so us just kind of sharing that message back and forth, it wasn't just that they were impacted by my work, but it was that God was reminding me through my own work that he loves me. And man, I always want to be reminded of that. Number 8, what art project have you wanted to do but haven't? And why haven't you done it? I've always wanted to do an art installation. And those are kind of more like, they've come around more in the contemporary art world recently in the past decade or so. But basically where you kind of transform an entire room or an entire gallery space where art is like climbing up the walls or completely like covering the floor or hanging from the ceiling or something like that. I've always wanted to do an installation like that, but I never have. I've come close. I've done some pretty wacky sculptures, but never to the extent of calling it like an installation. Why haven't I? One, it's hard to apply to a show with something that large because you need to have already put it in a show to be able to photograph it. So it's one of those like cyclical things where I would have to make a piece and then take pictures of it and hope that someone did want to see it and put it in their show. But also, I think just working on a smaller scale, since I drive my stuff around the South a lot, that's probably another reason. I still want to do it though. I have a feeling I'll do it one of these days. I have an idea with like clay extruded tubes, but again, I don't know what message that I really want to say with that. So I think a lot of it comes from me waiting to see that how I can, what message I should say, I guess. Like I have the idea, but I don't know the why behind it. So I'm kind of waiting for that concept before I just plunge right in. So we'll see. What is the hardest part about being an artist is question number 9. The hardest, there's so many hardest parts of being an artist. It's hard to pick just one. As a potter, it's really hard for me to carry all my pots to my car, load up my car, drive it to a show at like 6 in the morning, unload all the pots for the show, set up in the middle of the road somewhere, like most of these outdoor festivals are, and then stand out there for 8 hours selling pots and then pack them all back up into the car and drive them back to the studio and put them all back in the studio all in the same day. So I'm kind of trying to move away from so much physical back-breaking experiences in that way. So probably from just my physical limitations, schlepping pots around the South is probably the difficult part. But there's a lot of other hard parts. I think marketing myself is hard because I don't always want to talk about myself or like boast about myself in a way that would bring sales. So I think sometimes just marketing is challenging, especially as an introvert. Coming up with like different ideas. Probably the hardest thing though is balancing what do I want to make versus what do I think will sell. And again, that's probably more in the ceramics world. Of a lot of the work that is expected of potters is utilitarian. People want to buy mugs, they want to buy plates, but those might not be the things that I want to make. I might want to make a sculpture or a lidded vessel or something completely off the wall and unfunctional is what they might see it as. But art always has a function, right? It's there to be viewed, it's there to be experienced, and so why does it need any other function than that? But that is a challenge, because in one hand you want to sell your work so you have room to make more work and you have the money to buy more materials to continue making work. But then on the flip side, you want to make work that you enjoy making. So I think that's probably the hardest part. And last but not least, number 10, what do you hope people take away from experiencing your work? What message are you ultimately saying? And like I said, with Hurricane Helene, that really did change from me originally just showing like the inner strength of feminine beauty, has now kind of pivoted to be the inner strength from God for all humanity. And so I don't know if my work will always look like this. I would say it probably won't, just based on how I like to make things, and based on experience. What you go through changes who you are a lot of times. So I don't see my work staying stagnant from now on, but as of right now, I think my work is showing the beauty and brokenness, and I wish people would take away the knowledge that God loves them, the confidence that God is working through them, that they're able to be messengers on his behalf. And the message I'm ultimately saying, I guess, would be along the lines of the love that God has for us, and the part that we don't always see, but that others would see. So without the light in that vessel, and it's just cracked on the outside, it's still beautiful in a way, but those cracks are, shadows. You really notice the cracks as part of the piece. But then when the light is lit in the votive, when you put the candle in there and you see the soft glow through the porcelain, I think that's when you really notice that the cracks are highlighted, but they also are, you're not focusing on the crack as much as you're focusing on the light. And so the light comes through the translucent porcelain everywhere, but especially in the cracks. And so I think that is a commentary on our Christian walk with the Lord. And like I said, that wasn't work I intended making. And when I started making the cracked vessels, I had no idea what they were for. Thankfully, I'm part of a Christian art critique community in the area, and so I was able to kind of get feedback from them, bounce my new work off of them, see what they were thinking. And I don't know why it took me so long. I think that's one of those times where like the Lord allowed my eyes to be closed about certain things until it was just the right moment, because at the time I was just making broken vessels. But then when he did allow me to remember that this porcelain is translucent, focusing on that beauty and that transformation, I mean, man, the transformation between the light being off versus turning the light on is, it just kind of brings me to tears, because that really is the difference of the human experience on earth, is how your life looks when you're, hopeless and lost, when you don't have the God of the world on your side, versus when you accept him as your Lord and Savior and he is in charge of your life. Seeing that change and seeing that hope in a better life after this one, hope that God knows exactly what he's doing and that whatever this brokenness is part of his plan, and hope that he has the ultimate plan for his glory and our good along with that, and that we are ultimately here to glorify him. And just seeing that all through the experience of the light through the broken cracks, that's really what I'm hoping people take away. So those are those 10 questions I will be asking other guests that will appear on here shortly. That is my quick and easy little version. Thank you so much for listening. More to come, definitely, for sure. I will elaborate on my testimony as well in the coming weeks. Thank you so much for being here, and until next time, blessings.